Have you been tortured in family court? What is family court really? Is it a place to fairly divide the marital assets and create a healthy parenting plan for the children? Or is it a criminal extortion racket designed to destroy families and take all the money? And what is the purpose of these so-called protective orders? Do they protect the innocent from violence, or do they protect the guilty from justice? Welcome to Freedom Enough. I am Alexander Baker, your legal expert. Today we're breaking down the multi-billion-dollar family court industry and asking, how is this even legal? Spoiler alert, it's not. Not under any reasonable definition of what's right and wrong. Look, I know you want freedom, but do you want freedom enough? That's the question. By now, tens of millions of people have been processed through the family court system. I have yet to meet even a single person who's been through it and thinks that's what's happening in family court is okay. Some people figure it out right away, others take a little bit longer, but the universal conclusion is that the family court system, and I include in that the probate court and the child welfare court, is an extortion racket. If you disagree, and attorney Michael Schmidt, I'm calling you out regarding the Elizabeth Harding Weinstein case, which you seem to be so interested in. You come on this podcast and you explain where I'm wrong. Contact is that QR code that's right up there above my head. Okay, these people who comprise the system, the judges, the lawyers, the social workers, the therapists, the guardian ad litems, and all of the rest, they don't care one bit about you or your children or your house, or your money, or your health. Now, what they care about is enriching themselves and causing as much destruction to the social fabric as possible. You must understand, we are in the final stages of a communist takeover of the entire planet. Karl Marx was very clear about what is necessary to achieve communism. You must have a central bank, so that you can counterfeit money without limit. You must have a government education system so that you can brainwash generation after generation. And you must have property taxes, which makes the government the owner and the landlord of all land. You must have a progressive income tax to do social engineering. All of these things have been achieved over 100 years ago. The last remaining step to achieve Marx's vision is the abolition of the nuclear family as the basic building block of society. And that, I believe, is the true purpose of the family court system. Destroying millions of families takes a lot of work, and that's why they've created strong financial incentives for government agents to seize the children and hold them as hostages. Whether seized physically, like social workers kidnapping kids and placing them into foster care on allegations and rumors alone, or subject to a judge's jurisdiction, which is a fancy word that means they seized control, it is well understood that a parent's love for their child knows no bounds. When your child is taken, there's basically nothing you won't do to try to get them back, right? Nothing that you basically wouldn't do. In family court, and all over America and all over the Western world, one of the key strategic moves that the government makes is to grant a family law restraining order, also known as a protective order against one or the other parent. We call this move the silver bullet. Now, the definition of what constitutes abuse under these protective orders has gotten so broad that literally anyone can be subjected to a restraining order at any time for any reason or for no reason at all. And if you think I'm kidding or you think I'm even exaggerating, well, you just don't know. You just don't know. As a legal expert, I can inform you without hesitation that the family court system is unconstitutional in many, many ways, okay? And that, of course, is if you still want to believe that the Constitution itself has any legitimacy, which I don't. But assuming that the Constitution guarantees your rights, the Sixth Amendment says you have a right to a jury trial in criminal matters. The Seventh Amendment says you have the right to a jury trial in civil matters. And that's really all there is in terms of legal disputes. Criminal matters are where the government is the prosecutor, and civil matters is where you have a plaintiff and a defendant. And a criminal matter is one where the defendant can suffer a loss of a fundamental liberty, such as losing your child. A civil matter is one where a party can be made to pay money to the other side. Family court involves both concepts. It's part criminal and part civil. Now, to get around this, the rulers claim that family court is a court of equity. And this is just nonsense. In medieval England, where we inherit our legal system from, there were courts of law and there were also courts of equity. The court of equity could only be reached if you had tried to get a remedy in a court of law and could not. So even though we combine those two systems, law and equity, it's still the rule that to pursue any equitable remedy, you must first exhaust any legal remedy that you might have. And in a real court of equity, there are no statutes defining crimes or civil torts. No, that's what a court of law is about. In equity, you simply argue fairness. Come to a court of equity, you say, these are the facts, and it would only be fair if the court gave me the remedy that I'm looking for. Clearly, our current family court system is a court of law. Look at all of the statutes that you have to know in order to proceed in family court. The rulers, our overlords, that is the communists or the globalists or whatever you want to call them, understand that allowing a jury to decide factual matters would ruin their plans, right? Our Anglo-Saxon forefathers, they understood very, very well that allowing judges to decide cases is tyranny. It's wrong. Ordinary people sitting on juries are who should decide a factual dispute in any kind of legal dispute. It's if you want a jury, you as a party, you should have the right to decide if you want a jury to decide your case and if you can afford it. To digress a little bit, the idea that judges should decide cases is taken from Jewish law, and in particular from the Talmud, where the rabbis were the judges and would essentially make up whatever the law is on a case-by-case basis, doesn't that sound like the system that we are dealing with right now? So, the family court system, probate court, child welfare court, these are fundamentally illegal in their very conception under the very Constitution that they say is the supreme law of the land. Obviously, it's all a hoax. Now, even if you believe the Constitution is legitimate, the people calling themselves the government never had any right to set up the family court system. They just didn't. So before you worry about this decision or that decision made by the court is correct, ask the more basic question. Do these people have any right to force you into this system, whatever decisions they might make later on? I think you know my answer, but what do you think? What should be done about this abomination known as family court? Should we abolish it, or can it be fixed? should we adopt a system like they have in Sweden, where apparently, and according to my guest today, money is not at issue and 50-50 parenting is the rule? Does that sound good? Well, I'm not so sure, but today I am going to play an interview with Daya Baran, who has the website freeariana.org. It's free Ariana with two N's.org. And we're going to talk about his story, the research that he's done into the corrupt divorce industry. This is a graph that he prepared that we're looking at in the frame right now, and we're going to talk about it. And we'll talk about some possible solutions to this problem. So let's go now to the recorded interview. I am talking with my new friend, Daya Baran, with the website freeariana.org. Daya is a researcher into the very profitable yet horribly evil family court kids for cash system. Like most of us, Daya got interested in exposing the racket because it happened to him. Daya, welcome to the Freedom Enough podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So I know your life changed when you discovered your father-in-law doing something terrible. But first, tell us a little bit about your married life and your career leading up to this.
Sure. I was very happily married to this woman, my ex-wife, for almost 10 years. And I was a very successful entrepreneur and investment banker prior to that. And we had a great life. Everything was roses. And one day, I had a very lavish life in Silicon Valley. And then we went on a vacation, and that's when this entire nightmare started.
So one night you walk in on your wife's father and your then, I think, 2-year-old daughter at the time. And now I know this might be a little difficult to talk about, but what exactly did you see happening?
So it was in the daytime. It was around 9 o'clock. My ex-wife had put my daughter to bed after breakfast, and that was our last day. We were in Toronto, Canada. We were on vacation, and that was the last day of our vacation. And I went to check on my daughter. And as I made my way up to the house, it's a pretty big home. The wing that we were staying in, I saw the door was slightly open, and I thought that's really weird. So I went in and I opened the door, and when I opened the door, I saw her father standing over my daughter. She was actually 1.5, and he was touching her genitals, and he was standing over her, and he was masturbating.
Oh my God. Okay, so you see this, and so what do you do about that?
I panicked. I freaked out. I was sweating, and my blood was boiling, and I just yelled like, "What the F are you doing?" And he just quietly put his penis in his pajamas, and he just walked by me, and he just stared me in the eye, and I was sweating by now.
Yeah.
And he just walked away, didn't say a word to me. And
Wow.
I went downstairs and I told my ex-wife, I saw your father doing this, and she goes, "Oh, don't make a big deal about it." And I said, it is a big deal, and I'm going to report your father to the police. And she goes, "No, no." And then before I knew, her brother came, and he says, "Let's go to the airport. I'm going to take you to the airport." And I said to him, "Hey, you know what? I saw your father touching my daughter, and he was masturbating." He goes to me, "No, look, this is a family matter. There's no need to involve the police." And he just rushed me to the airport, and he put me on a plane. And we came back to Canada. We came back to San Francisco from Canada. This happened in Canada. And then I for the next couple of months, my ex-wife was pleading with me not to go to the police, to expose her father. And I said, look, I've had it. I'm going to go to the police. And then before I knew, the process server serving the divorce papers and accused me of domestic violence.
Wow.
And then
So about how long in time from this incident to when you get hit with divorce papers?
so the incident happened on June 13th, 2015, and I was served with divorce papers on November 17th, 2015. So it's 4 months.
A few months.
Yeah.
So you say a part of your now ex-wife's petition for divorce. This is in California. Her petition included like a domestic violence restraining order.
Right. Right.
So tell me, like, how specific were her allegations, and what exactly did she say that you did, if anything?
Her allegations weren't specific at all. Her allegations was that she was afraid. What happened was I went to pick up my daughter for a visit, and she refused to give me my daughter for the visit. And she said, if you don't leave now, I'm going to call the police and say you're harassing me. And I said, look, I've got a court order saying I can take my daughter on a visit. So she refused to give me my daughter, and she goes to me, if you stop involving my father in this. And I said, your father is involved. We are in this situation where we are today because of your father molesting my daughter. And her father's pretty wealthy, and my ex-wife stands to inherit many millions of dollars from him. And she is protecting him at every cost. She was brought up like a princess, and she's protecting him because she needs access to her inheritance. And so I didn't see my daughter that day. I left, and then the next thing I knew, I was served with domestic violence papers, saying I'm harassing her. By then I had already been thrown out of my home. I was sleeping in my car. I was eating Trader Joe's peanuts, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And here I was moving from a home where I have staff, I have a chef. I never really prepared my meals. Everything's done for me when I come from the office. And to sleeping in my car, and she had took the domestic violence paper, and she had control of all my bank accounts, and she took away millions of dollars, closed all my accounts, and all my accounts are tried to my business accounts, and cut all my credit cards except 2 or 3 personal cards. And so I was left without any funds. And then she used now it's probably close to $1 million of my own money to hire lawyers to cover up sexual abuse by changing the narrative to domestic violence.
Yeah, it's there's a reason we call these restraining orders the silver bullet. It's become like standard practice in California family law, and I think pretty much everywhere, to use restraining orders or protective orders as a strategic weapon. In my own case and so many others, protective orders are used not to protect the innocent from violence, but to protect the guilty from justice. So she retaliated against you with this restraining order. And yeah, you say there really weren't specific allegations. I know you probably know this, but for the people listening, in California, we have this, it's the Domestic Violence Prevention Act, DVPA. And part of the definition of abuse under that law is what you'd expect. I mean, you're not allowed to hit or stalk or beat or, things like that, which is fine. But then there's also these weasel words that are in there that says you cannot disturb the peace. No disturbing the peace of the other person. And there's been a whole lot of case law around that. And eventually they modified the statute to read that disturbing the peace means any conduct that destroys the mental or emotional calm of the other person. And as I ultimately, in my case, would argue to the Court of Appeal, I said, what does that mean? Or better yet, Your Honors, what doesn't it mean? I mean, it could mean anything, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, she's basically saying, "Oh, I'm afraid," it's, and that's enough. I mean, they pass these restraining orders out like balloons at a party. They just,
Right. Right. So my restraining order was issued for disturbing peace. And I said, what peace are you talking about? Because I had a right to be there to take my daughter on a visitation. But she, her lawyers were able to tell the judge that, that's considered disturbing the peace. So that's what the restraining order was issued on. And so.
Yeah. And I remember, I mean, it gets to the point of being absurd, right? Like in my case, my disturbing the peace was that I filed and then won a lawsuit against my ex-wife, who was also my ex-business partner in the music business. And it didn't matter whether my lawsuit had any merit or not. They literally found that all that matters is the effect that it has on her. And I said to the Court of Appeal in my oral argument, I said, well, wait a minute. I said, I will stipulate that coming over, or excuse me, that filing a lawsuit and litigating can absolutely be stressful and upset the peace of mind. I said, I'm stressed out. My peace of mind is upset around here, right? As I'm sure, when your ex-wife is concealing what your father-in-law did, I know that disturbed your peace of mind, right? So does that mean that you can get another one against her, and then can she get yet another one against you? I mean, the whole idea, once you go down that road or down that slippery slope, there's really like
right.
No.
And in this case, the domestic violence restraining order is used to change the narrative from sexual abuse of a minor to domestic violence. And it's basically pushing the actual crime under the rug and focusing on something that really did not take place.
Yeah, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? Let's not talk about this. Let's talk about that. And that's what you find over and over. These slimy divorce lawyers, they, anytime you have anything on the other side, they will reframe the conversation. They'll just throw stuff up against the wall. And it breaks my heart. It wrecks my mind. I mean, it just infuriates me every time I hear one of these stories. So you talked about this financial impact, that this whole thing has had on you. You're this successful entrepreneur, and all of a sudden, you're sleeping in your car. Same here. I mean, we're singing the same blues, as it were, and so are so many other people. Right. Let's and I know this has like spurred you to do research and to really start looking deeper into that. And you put up this website at freeariana.org. So I want to take a look at that. I want to make sure that we're sharing the screen here for a second.
So Free Ariana is actually a social network for people in the family court system. So you can create an account and you can start networking with other people that are going through the same problems that you're going through. And you can identify the judges and lawyers that you're working with. And
so I see there's a login. So is that if I wanted to make an account in your social network, is that where I would start?
That's correct. Yes. Okay. Correct. You would sign up. You create an account, and if you go to community, click on community. Yeah. So when you go to community, you can see the latest things. And it's also a reference of a point of all the movies of what happened, how this came about. If you click on a directory, you can see you can see people. It's fairly new. So if you click on directory,
So is that across? Wait, is that across the top or? Oh, this one. I see it. I see it. Okay.
so you can see people, judges. So right now, people there's no way for people to connect and find out which judges are ruling against them, and there's usually a pattern with attorneys, judges, lawyers, therapists that are doing the same thing over and over and over. So this way you can connect with other people and you can take action. Because right now, if you file something with the state bar, they tell you, oh, we've never heard of this before. But this way, through the site, I've connected with 5 other people that have filed the same complaint against the same attorney. And the state bar keeps telling me I'm the only one. And now I've got 5 people and I'm actually in a conversation with them.
And these, I see you're calling out the therapists, and I call them the assassin therapists. I had one in my case. In fact, that was like the very first thing that happened in my case. Is I didn't know it, but my soon-to-be ex-wife took our younger daughter into therapy with this therapist, and they were just filling her head up with just lies about me. And
Right.
this therapist was one who believes and teaches that fathers are unnecessary. We don't need them. And they actually diagnosed my daughter with something called adjustment disorder, which meant that she was sad and upset that her father, who loved her and who had just taken great care of her since she was a little baby, was now being X'd out of her life, and she was being made to repeat or try to believe in all of these terrible things. Oh, I'm a drug addict. I'm an unsafe driver. I'm an emotional child abuser. All of this, So of course she's going to be upset about that. And there's a number of other ones. These therapists and these guardian ad litems and minors therapists and all this. It's just so twisted. Oh, I notice here, I'm going to guess that she pronounces her name Lee, but I see here Cynthia Lai.
Cynthia Lai, yeah.
Maybe there can be something in a name. I don't know. This Cynthia Lai. So she's a judge. And did I see somewhere on your site that she got promoted to the appellate court? Is that right?
That's great.
But so she was your trial court judge back then?
She was my trial court judge in family court, and she's totally anti-men, and she just doesn't listen to what you have to say. She just ruled against me every single time. There was no evidence. She doesn't want to hear anything. She even said to me, we wouldn't have this problem if there were no men, and she's a total feminist, and she's playing a political game, and she's allowed my ex-wife to file 370 actions against me. I've been to court more times than most people have done in their entire life in a few years, and she allowed these lawyers to take out $50,000 a month for 10 months while I was starving and sleeping in my car.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same kind of story. I mean, when at the time I filed for divorce in 2014, we owned 3 houses. We had a nice house that we lived in the hills in Sherman Oaks with a swimming pool, and our kids went to private school and then we had 2 other houses, and we were successful in the music business. We had royalty money that was coming in. It was all paid for through music, which is like crazy, right? Mm-hmm. And then I was just completely X'd out and made to starve. And she's like spending our money to hire these very expensive lawyers. And meanwhile, she ended up stealing everything, the houses, the business, all the money, just absolutely everything. And I had all of the evidence needed to prove it, and these judges just let her get away with this for years, years.
Because the judges are financially benefiting from this ongoing saga, because a lot of these same lawyers are donating to these judges' campaigns, and those campaigns are not fully disclosed. And there's not just hard cash, there's also soft benefits that they derive. So, when the judges issue a DV against someone, the opposing party, the lawyers, they don't contest it, because those lawyers themselves are issuing DVs for other clients, and they want the same judges to approve those DVs. So, it's a no-win situation. So your lawyers that you hire to fight a DV are usually not fighting hard to overturn your DV, because especially if they're working in that court system, that specific court.
One of the most interesting things that I learned in law school is that a lawyer owes his second highest duty of loyalty to the client. The highest level of loyalty by the lawyer is owed to the court, which, and if you think about it, the lawyer on the other side, whoever that might be, they too owe their highest duty to the court. And what that means in the real world is the judge, who's also a lawyer, and all of the lawyers, they all belong to the lawyer club. And they basically, in most of these cases, they just figure out, the case in the beginning. And when they figure out a case, they basically figure out three things. Number one, how much is this case worth in terms of money? Number two, where exactly is the money? And number three, how do we, the lawyers and the system, get the money? And it's kind of as crude as that. I see this. This is a graph that you have on your site, and talking about the Kids for Cash law. So let's just go through about some of this. It says at the top, judges and lawyers are above the law. American family is destroyed. Middle class fatherless. Daughters become prostitutes. Yeah, that's true. I guess that's at the very end. So let's just start down here on at the lower left. Clinton signs Cash for Kids. What is that?
Right. So Cash for Kids law is really the Safe Families Act law. It was pushed by lawyers, family court lawyers, and it's basically expanding the adoption of kids into foster care homes. It's expanding the DV laws of WAWA, and
Right.
also expanding the crime bill, the Joe Biden crime bill. So there are really three laws that play into this entire family court system, although they look very separate. One is a 1994 crime bill by Joe Biden, then is the WAWA that Biden put in place, then there is the Safe Families Act. So all these three things really work in concert to dismantle families, and dismantling families, whether through the family courts, through the juvenile system, or through the foster care system. So that's how it works. It breaks up families, and there is a monetary reason for all of those things for different parties. So in the family court system, it's lawyers. In the juvenile system, it's a lot of the therapists, and the foster care system is therapists. Now there's medical companies involved with all this gender change, and it's even lawyers. A lot of the lawyers actually own a lot of the foster care homes under numbered companies. So those companies are not disclosed in their form. Is it 700 or 1,000 that they file with assets? So they're not included in those forms. So they get, depending on the child, they get between $3,000 to $7,000 a month. Depending on if it's a healthy child, it's probably $3,000. If it's a disabled child or child under medication, under 5150. So that's why they try to get all these kids medicated and drugged so they can get a higher amount. And so that's what's going on.
I mean, they've just created a strong financial incentive to take children away from their families and into the system. And I mean, there's some slight differences between family court, and then there's probate court that handles a lot of juvenile matters. And dependent adult matters as well. And then there's the child welfare system in California, it's Welfare and Institutions Code, but they're all very similar. I mean, there's no jury trials. These are all judge trials, and they're seizing control of the children in various different ways. But what most people don't get, and that you've done a great job of exposing, I think, on your site and with this graph, is that at the federal level, and I believe it's part of the Social Security Act, that they have created and put billions and billions of federal dollars to incentivize the taking of children. And I think it is not a coincidence. I'll go way out on a limb and say that it's not a coincidence that Karl Marx, when he was first describing communism and what it would take to impose communism on a society, there were a few major elements of it: central banking, public education, strong, heavy taxes, basically, and abolition of private property. But breaking down the nuclear family as the building block of society was a key component of communism. And I think it's pretty clear, a healthy, functioning, intact family basically doesn't need the government for very much. And it's even true with divorced families. I have seen divorces that were healthy, and the kids were fine. Dad has a new girlfriend, mom has a new boyfriend. They live close together. They figure out the finances to where everybody can go forward. And I've seen it done right. And when it's done right, I promise you, it's because they didn't rely on these judges and these therapists and these lawyers and this system. They did the opposite of that. They said, we're adults, we can figure this out, and we're going to figure this out. And that's what we would recommend, right? So let's look back at this chart here.
Sure. So just to be clear, the Title 40, which is part of the Social Security Act, is primarily plays in child support. So if you owe $100, the state gets a matching amount. I think it's up to 60%. So that's why child support is enforced, whereas visitations are not enforced. So there's an incentive for police and sheriffs to get involved in enforcing child support, because there's a matching amount that comes from Title 40 of the Social Security Act. So that's where it is. So this has grown to be $100 billion business, at least on the family court side. And it started with just lawyers and judges, but then everybody else has piled on to it, such as therapists. And then they've expanded what DV means, so that they can track people in the system even more. And then now even accountants are involved in this, because it's a gravy train. The sheriffs are involved, police is involved, because police get a certain stipend for a DV call as opposed to just a regular call. If you call them from your home and you say, look, something's going on, they probably would not come as quickly as if you say there's a DV call, because they're incentivized to do that, especially, and this is more by county, so certain counties incentivize them more for those kind of, and there's no, all these things are operating without any transparency. So it's great for judges, great for lawyers, great for all these people, because they're not getting any scrutiny, and the politicians are not paying attention to it, because it's like, it's got nothing to do with running the country or county or the state. It's a family issue. It's people with family problems. So we've got under control with the system that we have in place. And then the media is not paying attention to it either. So.
Right. And you do, speaking of media, you do link to this article on US News and World Report. It's called Kids for Cash, Judge's Order to Pay more than $200 million. Let's have a little look at this, because I have thoughts about this. Now, this is a case that we've talked about for some amount of time. This was two former Pennsylvania judges who orchestrated a scheme to send children to for-profit jails. Well, yeah, kind of. Let me look at my notes here. It was a scheme to send child criminals to for-profit jails instead of government-run juvenile detention centers in exchange for kickbacks. And they were ordered, these defendants, criminal defendants, these judges, to pay more than $200 million to people they victimized in one of the worst judicial scandals in U.S. history. And here's kind of my take on it. Of course, it's wrong for judges to take bribes and kickbacks for anything. And of course, the news should report on this ruling. But I actually hate this ruling and I hate this reporting for a couple of reasons. First of all, it suggests that the problem is profit itself while government is sort of given a pass. And one question I would have is, why is going to a private jail worse than going to a government jail? And the second thing is that the real kids for cash scandal is family, probate, child welfare courts, like we've just been talking about, where this federal money is paid to these local government officials and all the other hangers on, the whole divorce industry. And it's on a per child basis. And with with an additional money, as you mentioned, for diagnosis for certain, they want to diagnose every kid with ADHD or something, diagnose them with something because there's more money in it. And this is the whole tie into the pharmaceutical industry. That's another whole show. But but when you go searching for kids for cash, you're likely to find this article. And while this was bad, what these judges were doing, it's really not the same scam that we're talking about. And why is just the regular business as usual in the family courts, why is that not considered kids for cash? Why is that not considered bribes and kickbacks? Because it sure seems like it to me.
Right. The distinction between the child support and the foster care system is that's using public money, so it's governments involved, whereas a family court is more private money. It's private individuals paying. So private individuals are spending about $100 billion a year in family court. That's I would say that's the 2020 figures. In 2015, it was about 60 billion. So now I would say it's about 100 billion. When you get to child support, it's half family, half private money, and half public money because you're paying it and there's a government meeting it. So child support, there's about 23 million kids every year, that are in the United States in separated homes. And that changes, of course, every year because some of the kids reach 18 and they're no longer eligible, and the parents are no longer eligible for child support, but then there's a new batch comes in. So it sort of stays around that figure. So if you take child support at say 5,300 a year, that's another 100 billion right there, and it's usually more, it's more than that. So it's if it's $1,000 a kid per year, so that's $12,000. So the child support system is probably operating another 100 billion. And the foster care system is probably another 100 billion. But those are behind. The family court is basically the tip of the iceberg that's visible. Everything else is below it.
Wow. I mean, just wow. There's just this would be predictable. Anybody that's just studied just basic economics, honestly, would, in the beginning of this would say, okay, well, if you're going to create this incentive, you're going to put money behind it. Well, then we can easily predict what's going to happen. And that is that, judges are going to be incentivized, and there'll be a ton of pressure on them to order as much child support as possible and just to do as much of this. There's going to be as many diagnoses as possible, et cetera, et cetera. As many kids as possible are going to go into foster care. And boy, I mean, I know so many of these stories where where people are just getting their children taken away. I mean, I know of one case that I'm involved in. This is the Augustus case, where we have a civil rights case pending in federal court in downtown Los Angeles. But this is a legally married biological parents of who at the time was a 14-year-old girl. And there was a vague allegation against the father of some kind of inappropriate touching. And on the basis of that, a person came in and filed a request for a guardianship of this child. Well, they had a secret hearing. I mean, unnoticed, no service or process to the parents whatsoever. And this hearing went down 5 days after the father was cleared. They had a whole DCFS investigation and a police investigation, and they found the charges were not credible. They exonerated him of all the charges. They show up to this hearing. It's a secret hearing, and they've got the report that says that this father is innocent of these charges. They don't bring that, and yet this judge grants a guardianship, and they take this kid away. And it's just like, really, this is happening in the United States of America? And I found out in working on this case, there's a law. There's another one of these laws that they made up, and this one's in the probate code, and it basically says that the judge can dispense with the notice requirements for good cause, but just like the restraining orders and everything else, there's no definition of what is good cause and what it is in reality. It's a checkbox. There's a court form, and they check off a checkbox, and there it is. We don't have to give you notice. We're going to take your child away from you after you've been found innocent of the one vague allegation, and we don't even have to give you notice that there's a hearing? Really? Really? That's absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah. And there's no due process in the entire family court system. It's hurting so many people.
I mean, I like to say, due process. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means what just happened. Whatever just happened to you in court, there's your due process. You're going to get due process. All right. You're going to get it good and hard. Right. All right. So, well, all right. So we got to wind it down here a little bit, but give me your thoughts, Daya, on what, if anything, you think, where should we be headed with this? What are some solutions maybe that you can think about? And then after that, I want to make sure not to forget to plug your website. I'm actually anxious. I didn't know you had a social media on your website. I'm actually anxious to join and have a look around there. But what are your thoughts on some solutions?
I think we should get to a system like what they have in Sweden, where there's no money involved in the divorce process. So unless there's major allegations that are proven, then if there's a divorce, then they get 50-50 custody, because that's what it really comes down to. Each parent gets 50-50 custody, and they get to see their kids. And so there's really no money in the process. In Sweden, it's a one-page. You file it. We're getting divorced. These are the reasons, and that's it. And we're splitting, and that's where we need to get to. And there's actually been a change in Russia as well, because in a lot of software engineers were starting to make a lot of money in Russia. It's starting in 2010, 2015. So a lot of women were filing domestic violence. And then these people are getting fired from their foreign companies that they're working for. So Putin put a new law in saying, okay, look, you can make domestic violence applications, but you have to prove it. Whereas in the US, if you're charged with it, you have to prove that you actually did not commit that, and it's very difficult to do that. So here,
that's guilty until proven innocent. I mean, that is actually just is completely opposite of what the system was supposed to be.
Right. So I think a Swedish model, and then the other thing is it actually costs the U.S. economy 3% in GDP when families go through divorce, because the money is simply going to the lawyers, but they're not pursuing their careers. The kids are getting impoverished. So it actually hurts the economy, helps people, because people that are running businesses like myself, the businesses fold, and then you end up laying off people, and there's no economic activity. You're not generating money, so it harms a lot of people besides the people going through the divorce.
Well, that's a really good point, and those are excellent things to look into. I don't know so much about the Swedish model, but now I want to. So I'm really, really curious about that. Again, Daya Baran with freeariana.org, and there's a lot of good information, including that chart that we were just looking at. A lot of links to videos like Divorce Corp, for example, which that's a few years old. To me, Divorce Corp is a great place to start. It's kind of tip of the iceberg, but it's a really good place to start.
Right.
And a lot of my friends have seen it, but if you haven't, that's a good place. And then there's a social media, which I didn't even know about. So thanks for telling us about that. Daya, thank you very, very much for coming on. And let's do this again real soon. All right.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you, Alex.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, is it a good idea to model our court system after the one in Sweden? First, let me say to Daya Baran, thanks for coming on. I definitely look forward to talking to you some more real soon. I consider you a friend, and I know you're playing for the right team. You don't have to agree with me about voluntarism to be my friend. You really only have to be coming from the right place in your heart. But I think it is worth it to say a few words about Sweden. A lot of people, especially my left-leaning friends, have long held up Sweden as an example of how socialism can work. It's not true, and I need to disabuse everyone of this notion. Since World War II, Sweden has had one of the most socialistic welfare systems in the world. Everyone gets free health care, free education, including college, subsidized housing, and more. Of course, nothing in the world is free. Tan staffel, right? There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. But before World War I, Sweden was one of the freest countries in the world. That is, free in the correct sense of the word, meaning free from government. I won't say the old Swedish government was good, but it was among the least bad, right? But Sweden was one of the lowest tax countries of all. Swedish businesses prospered, and the Swedish people enjoyed a high standard of living. Plus, very important, Sweden stayed completely out of both world wars, so they avoided the massive destruction of wealth suffered by the US, Russia, and most of Europe. For all of those reasons, by the mid-20th century, Sweden had built up a huge reserve of capital, and that is what allowed the Swedish government to then plunder that capital in the name of creating a welfare state. Of course, taxes now on individuals in Sweden are extremely high. Combined income and other taxes, the Swedish government takes up to 70% of people's wealth. 70%. Again, nothing is free in this world. It's only a question of who pays for it. So I'm not surprised to learn that the Swedish government does not use the family court system to extort wealth from the divorcing Swedish couples. But it's not because the Swedish government officials are nicer than those in the US or that they have a better system. No, it's because they've already extorted the wealth for generations by other means. Now, I know you want to fix the family court system, but before you worry about how to fix it, you should ask whether it's broken. Based on my experience, my expertise, I can say with no reservation that the court system is not broken. It is working just fine for its intended purpose. And we must always make sure that we're asking the right question. And the first question to ask, no matter what the problem is
What is the difference between right and wrong? And when you start there, you should arrive at the realization that you own yourself. Nobody has the right to rule you. When the family court judge claims to have personal jurisdiction over you, that's a fancy word that they made up, and it means they believe they own you as a slave. That's what it means. How much longer can you walk on this earth and survive family court or any government court before you realize that nobody owns you? You own yourself. And as long as you're not initiating force or fraud against another or against another's property, you should be allowed to do whatever you want. The law that should control you is the agreements that you voluntarily enter into. That's what freedom means. Government cannot give you freedom. No, it cannot. Government can only take freedom away. The solution to family court, to these hideous protective orders, to this global communist takeover, to this institutionalized pedophilia, to the court corruption, to the police brutality, to crippling taxation and regulation, the solution to all of it is voluntarism. Hey, my name is Alexander Baker. Don't shoot me. I'm just the messenger, and I am your legal expert. I know you love freedom. I love freedom. But the question now is whether you love freedom enough. Or where the name of this show came from. It's from a quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And I have to paraphrase off the top of my head right now, but what Solzhenitsyn said was that what we should have done is when the soldiers came around and arrested basically a quarter of the population and in Leningrad and put them in the gulag, put them in prison camps. He said, we were just too quiet. We were just too docile. We could have hit them, shot them, beaten them with hammers or whatever was at hand. But when it came down to it, says Solzhenitsyn, we didn't love freedom enough. I'll see you next Sunday on Speak Free Radio, and also go to pmjmp.org. That's my site. Live streaming now on Twitch, 2 p.m. Eastern every Sunday. Hang in there, everybody. We are working on this. People are waking up. Oh, yeah, they are. They're waking up by the millions. Check it out.
Look around. Fires are burning. Everybody living in a cage as the world keeps turning. Look around. Lives are breaking. Greedy, grubby hands understand that the man is taking what is for the taking. We fell in love with the money. We fell in love with the story. We fell asleep at the wheel and we didn't wake up. We thought we were so righteous. We thought we were courageous. We thought we were so tough, but push came to shove, and we didn't love, and we didn't love freedom enough. Freedom enough. Freedom enough.
Take care, everybody. Till next time, I'm Alexander Baker. Do you love freedom enough?